Hello all, welcome to the blog automation-home.blogspot.in. Today we have added a new implementation for reading the test data from the CSV file. So which will read the test data based on the test include criteria header name. So whether to consider it test data or to ignore the test data. For example, if you have 10 sets of test data and if you want to execute or if you want to consider only 6 sets of test data. So based on the criteria header name, only six set of test data can be considered, and other four rows or four sets of test data are ignored by the data driven framework. So let we go to the page data driven framework CSV version 3.0.2. Click on the test automation framework tab. Click on the link data driven by framework for CSV implementation. These are the prerequisite. uh, Java 1.6 or higher version should be there for executing the sample programs, and testng configured in the Eclipse IDE. Even without a testng plugin configured, we can perform the or we can execute the programs. We need to have a testng jar files in place, and it can be any other IDE, IntelliJ or NetBeans. It's not mandate to have Eclipse IDE. And setting the Java build path for downloading the jar file, setting the Java build path. So working with the example programs and executing. Here you can see the steps for setting the Java build path and executing the sample program. So click on the CSV version implementation for 3.0.2. Click on the link. Click on the repository link. So click on the data driven framework version 3.0.2. So download the zip file. So I have already downloaded the zip file into my location machine. By default, the zip file will be downloaded in the downloads folder of your machine. Once the zip file is downloaded, extract the zip file. Zip file contains the Java docs, release notes, examples, and uh, jar file. So we need to have two things in place. One is the jar file, and other one is the sample programs. Example folder contains the sample programs. So copy the jar file straight into your lib folder of your project. Next step is to copy the example folder into the src folder, nothing but the source folder of your project. So once these two things are done, set the Java build path for the jar file. Once the Java build path is set, open the sample program. So let me open the test data file as well. This is a sample program, sorry, sample test data file. If you want to read the test data from the CSV file, the mandatory thing is the file path for the CSV file. Let me update the file path for the CSV file. So once the CSV file path is updated, that's all. Another next important thing is you need to configure the headers. So this is the criteria, header criteria, and the criteria values. So include test data. This is the header. Let me open the sample test data file. This is the test data file. So this is the test data. This is the criteria header. So based on the criteria, so criteria value is true and false. Based on the criteria, it will read the test data. So if you see here, there are two rows are marked as true. So flight name Kingfisher and Go Air, and other rows are marked as false. So this two rows are included by are ignored by the data-driven framework, and row 2 and row 5 is considered by the data-driven framework. So when you execute the program, sample program, then it will display, then it will consider the only the rows which are marked as true. Rows which are marked as false are ignored by the data-driven framework. So let me execute the program. Here, two rows are executed. Nothing but two sets of test data are executed. One is with the flight name Kingfisher, and other one is Go Air. Nothing but Kingfisher and Go Air. If you want to add one more row, or else if you want to consider one more row, now you have three rows to be considered by the data-driven framework, and the fourth row is ignored by the data-driven framework. So let me re-execute the program. So before re-executing, if you see the test run is two, and two sets of test data are considered by the data-driven framework. So I'm not updating or I'm not changing anything in the sample program. Just I'm re-executing the program. What I'm doing is only updating the criteria value in the test data file. So based on the criteria value, that the API data-driven framework API will take the decision whether to include the test data or to exclude the test data. So run has now if you see the three sets of test data are executed. If you see the test run is three. So this is how the API works. No, in case if you do not want to use include test data, so if you want to use another header name, or else if you want to configure the header name with a different name, you can do it. You can do it with this configurable name. Say if I want to update the header name, criteria header name. So instead of having a include test data, if you want to have a include data, you can do it. So let me re-execute the program. Yeah. Oh, it throws an error. Include test data header name is not configured in the CSV file. Oh, sorry. I need to update the error message. So it's a mistake, workbook. I need to update the error message. I will be updating the error message in the upcoming version. So it throws an error. Include data header name is not configured. So why is it means it will search for the include data header criteria header in the test data file. If you see the test data file, it does not contain the include test data header. That's the reason it throws an error. So whenever you configure the header name, the same header name should be present in the test data file as well. Now let me re-execute the program. Now the program works fine. So what if I want to configure the I do not want to use true or false. I want to use run or no run, or else I want to use one means consider the test data, zero means ignore the test data, one zero. So whatever the value you set it for S test data S, it is considered by the data driven framework. Whatever the value you set it for the no test data no, that rows or the test data will be ignored by the data driven framework. Let me update the values 1 0 0. So if you see 1, what is this value 1 represents? In our code 1 represents yes means the test data should be considered by the data driven framework. 0 0 means if you see 0 is set for the parameter no. No means whatever the rows marked as 0 will be ignored by the data driven framework. You cannot see this test data while executing your sample program. Only the row 2. This test data is considered by the data driven framework. Let me re-execute the program. So now only one row is displayed in the output. I mean in the console. Test run is one, and the test data is Kingfisher name. Sorry, flight name Kingfisher. So that's how the API works. So in case in my framework I do not want to configure the criteria header, how can I? Is it possible? Yeah, you can comment it, and you can remove this criteria header name and values. So let me so take care of one thing. So here, if you remove the criteria header and criteria header name and criteria value, but if you have not removed the configuration setting the parameters configuration from the source code, and if you are trying to execute the program, so since the criteria header name is not present in the test data file, it throws an error. Run It will throws an error. So whenever if you do not want to use the criteria header name, just comment this 3 lines of code or delete these lines. So if you rerun the program, it is showing 4 sets of test data. So test run as 4 and 4 set of Kingfisher, Indian Airlines, Emirates, and Go Air. Let me check with so it contains the 4 sets of test data. If the criteria header name is not configured, so whatever the data, so it can be 10 sets of data, 20 or 100 sets of data. So all the test data is considered by the data driven framework. and it will execute all the sets of test data present in the test data file. This is how the API works. Thanks all. Have a nice day.